No, Marty, please.
I like you. I've been telling you all night I like you.
Marty.
All I want's a little kiss.
No.
Please.
No.
Please.
No, Marty.
All right. I'll take you home. All I wanted was a lousy kiss. Do you think I was going to try something serious? My mother coming home any minute?
When people talk about the great winners of Best Picture in Oscars history, the movie Marty almost never comes up, and I'm not quite sure why that is, because I honestly think it belongs in the conversation. This movie came out in 1955 to great reviews and won the Oscars' highest honor in 1956, breaking plenty of ground in the process. You see, Marty was a pretty low-budget movie by a first-time director that runs for just 90 minutes and has a very small scope of focus. None of that sounds like typical Best Picture fare, does it? It also stars a bunch of no-name actors who look nothing like Hollywood matinee idols. Aside from Marty and 1954's On the Waterfront, the kinds of movies that typically won Best Picture in the 1950s were big epics like Ben-Hur and The Bridge on the River Kwai, or colorful musicals like Gigi or An American in Paris. Marty could not possibly have less in common with those movies I mentioned that were winning Best Picture Oscars in the 1950s. It's kind of a unicorn of its era. This movie is set in the Bronx, and it takes place over the span of a little more than 24 hours. It follows a kind-hearted 34-year-old butcher named Marty, who comes from a big family but is his only sibling not to be married yet, which is something he can't seem to go 5 minutes without being reminded of.
My boy Frank was 19 years old when he got married. What's the matter with you?
That's swell, Miss Fazeri.
You should be ashamed yourself.
He lives in his childhood home with his doting mother and has a close relationship with her despite her constant prodding about his lack of a love life.
I don't want you hanging around the house tonight. I want you to go take a shave and go dance.
Ma, when are you going to give up? You got a bachelor on your hands. I ain't never going to get married.
You're going to get married.
Ma, sooner or later there comes a point in a man's life when he's got to face some facts. And one fact I got to face is that whatever it is that women like, I ain't got it.
Marty also hangs around with a group of pals whose primary interests include ogling pinups in skin magazines and trying to score with easy women on their nights off.
Put it away, will you? My mother'll come walking in.
Hey, Marty, what do you say? Let's go down 72nd Street area tonight?
I don't feel like going, Angie.
Again, these are guys that are supposed to be like in their 30s. They're not supposed to be teenagers or like early 20-somethings, so they should probably be doing other things with their time. In the movie, Marty is played by Ernest Borgnine, who was a late starter in Hollywood, actually. He didn't get his first screen credits on TV or in the movies until about 1950, when he was already in his 30s. So he became a really unlikely big-time star when Marty came out and he won the Oscar, the BAFTA, and the Golden Globe for his performance in the movie. When you watch Marty, you quickly see that this was an instance of perfect casting. Borgnine used every one of his own years as a kid growing up in an Italian family in Connecticut and being a bachelor himself until his early 30s in bringing so much depth and life to his character. And yet another link between the real-life man, Ernest Borgnine, and the character Marty is that they're both veterans. You can't help but adore this guy and appreciate his attitude and his sensitivity. And it's impossible for me to imagine any other actor playing this role, even though audiences at the time probably had another actor in mind when they were watching this movie. You see, this movie was actually based on a 1953 TV play, so it had just aired on television just 2 years before this movie came out, so I'm sure a lot of viewers still had it in their minds, the TV version, when they went to see the movie version. In the TV version, Marty was played by the great Rod Steiger, but I think recasting the role was really smart because it's unlikely many people would have paid to go see a movie version of something that they'd already seen for free with the same actors. You might think the way I've described him, a bachelor who's mild-mannered, who gets along with his mother, he's just a nice, warm guy. You might think he sounds like kind of a dull character who's written, honestly, as a perfect man who has no personal flaws. But that's not the case at all. He has resigned himself to a life of solitude mostly because of a fear of rejection, which he describes several times in blunt phrasing that mimics what women have either told him about his looks or simply what he thinks himself.
I got feelings, you know. I had enough pain. No thanks, Ma.
Marty.
No. I'm going to stay home tonight and watch the hit parade.
You're going to die without a son.
So I'll die without a son.
Oh, Marty, put on the blue suit, huh?
Blue suit, gray suit. I'm just a fat little man, a fat, ugly man.
You're not ugly.
I'm ugly.
Marty.
Ma, leave me alone!
Marty also has dreams of buying the ownership stake in the butcher shop where he works, but he's ultimately afraid to take the gamble on himself. and he gets kind of shut down by an accountant cousin of his whom he consults about possibly buying it.
What do you want to buy a shop for, will you tell me? You got a good job, you got no wife, you got no responsibilities. Boy, I wish I was you, boy.
You see, it's this fear that keeps Marty content with a life where he's living at home with his mom, he's hanging out with friends who don't challenge him, and he's working a low-risk job that he knows he's good at. But his whole outlook changes overnight when he meets a meek woman out at a dance hall. This is where we're introduced to Clara, a school teacher who's out on a blind date with a guy that couldn't have less interest in her. Just like Ernest Borgnine in the Marty role, Clara is played with incredible warmth by Betsy Blair, who was also nominated for an Oscar for her work here.
You see that girl sitting over there in the gray dress?
Yeah?
Well, last time I was here, that's where I sat. I sat there for an hour and a half without moving a muscle.
In fact, warmth is really the best way to describe the feeling you get when you watch any scenes in this movie that have Marty and Clara in them. I mean, this is the kind of couple that you would love to know in real life. It's the kind of couple that would feel totally uncomfortable going to a high-class restaurant, but would love a night of bowling and hamburgers. Ernest Borgnine and Betsy Blair create a kind of chemistry that feels more like true love than the simple raw lust that most screen couples create on screen. Simply watching them have a conversation in a small restaurant becomes the kind of scene that shows why Marty is a great film. These are just regular people who would probably be extras in most Hollywood films, but here they are at the forefront, and their budding romance feels like the most important issue in the world as the reels roll on.
There's nothing wrong with being a butcher.
Well, it's not an elegant profession. It's in a lower social scale. People look down on butchers.
I don't.
There's a loneliness and a coldness that kind of simmers beneath the surface in most scenes of Marty. That is, until Marty and Clara get together, and then the two of them together find this shelter and warmth against that cold society. And that's the greatness of Paddy Chevesky's script, because he's able to show you the importance of something so simple like acceptance in a society that can be so brutal and rejecting. The movie gets really tense toward the end, which is rare for what's essentially a romantic drama. You start to see how the people around Marty, including his friends and his own mother, are trying to keep him isolated for their own needs instead of being supportive of what could be a life-changing experience for him.
What are you going to do if Marty gets married? What are you going to do?
And Chevesky writes the whole thing in a way that makes you guess right up until the end what exactly is going to happen between these two characters. I'm not even kidding you, there are so many scenes in Marty where you just want to slap the crap out of the supporting characters and you just want to grab Marty himself and just punch him in the face and tell him, this is what you need to do. You know what's in your heart. This is what you should do. It's simple. Just do it, man. But that's a credit again to Chevesky's writing and also to the great performances that fill every frame of this movie. And the guy who you most want to deck in the whole film is Marty's pal Angie, who's played by Joe Mantell. Mantell is one of the few actors to reprise his role from the TV version. He must have spent a couple years between these versions perfecting how to give his character the most punchable face in 1955 cinema.
What are we going to do now?
Well, I'm going to take Clara home. It's close to 1.
You want me to ride down with you?
What for?
It's early.
Well, it must be 1 o'clock.
It's Saturday night. There's still plenty action around.
I mean, this guy is just a miserable dick from start to finish, and that's exactly what the part calls for.
Hey, Ange. Hey, I'll see you tomorrow at the Mass, huh?
In addition to being a great Best Picture winner, Marty also won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival that year. And I'd say it's easily one of the most accessible movies to ever win that award, which is usually reserved for a lot of highbrow kind of artistic cinema. No matter what kind of movie you like, I think you can easily sink your teeth into Marty, and that's rare for any Palme d'Or winner. I'd also say that this is one of the great New York movies that I've ever seen. Films set in New York are a dime a dozen, but when a great director like a Sidney Lumet or a Martin Scorsese comes along and really captures the essence of the city on film, it's always exciting and it's rare. But that's what Delbert Mann, who was the director of Marty, does here. And it's great work from a guy who had never made a feature film before. I want to talk about the cinematography too, because especially in this scene where Marty and Clara take a stroll at night, the cinematography is just full of soul. Most of this film is quite claustrophobic, showing how small the lives led by these characters are. But when they finally meet, things start to open up for them, And we see that in the shots pulled off by cinematographer Joseph Lachelle in this sequence. He also gives us one of the single most heartbreaking tracking shots in cinema history as we settle on Clara in her living room watching television with her parents. We've got the tears rolling down her cheek. Everyone else is just watching TV. They don't know how important this moment is in her life, but the viewer knows and Clara knows, and you can see it all over her face. I don't want to give anything away, but let me just say that the final 10 to 15 minutes of Marty are such a roller coaster of emotions. And again, I think it's a big credit to writer Paddy Chevesky. It just shows how much of a genius he was behind the typewriter and how ruthless he could be, because you just have no idea where this movie's going to go in those final moments, but it all feels right and it all feels natural as it comes together. If you've been waiting around to see Marty and have had it lingering on your list of movies to see for a while, find a copy of it and cross it off your list immediately. This is a film that any lover of drama or romance, especially human drama, must see. It's a beautiful film with fully fleshed characters who feel as real as anyone you'll ever see on a movie screen. If you like my reviews, please subscribe to the YouTube channel here, tell your friends about it, and also, if you're a podcast listener, find me on the Stream Police podcast, wherever it is that you get your audio, because every month there I give my takes on movies and TV.